right, thank you for joining us this evening. This is a regularly scheduled and called Greer City Council meeting called and convened this evening, July the 14th, 2016. I appreciate you joining us this evening, and I would say that I hope you can get back to your car dry, but actually my garden needs the rain, so I'm not gonna wish that on anybody tonight. So maybe you'll just get a little wet going back to your car, and my garden will get wet. Thanks for being with us. As we normally do, we open our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance and an invocation, which will be offered by Councilman Jay Arrowwood tonight. I know that we have Garrett Norton with Troop 603, which is Grace United Methodist Church, with us this evening. I know that I'm going to ask Garrett if he would come up front and to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. And I see we've had some other scouts come in, so if you fellows want to stand and join him, he is going to lead us as we all stand for the pledge and remain standing for the invocation by Mr. Jay Arrowwood. Mr. Norton, the floor is yours, sir.
And with your heart are saluted in uniform. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you that you're always with us. I thank you, Lord, that you're in charge, and I thank you for this cooling rain just in. Lord, I pray that you be with our council tonight as we serve the citizens, and I pray that what we do will be pleasing in your sight. Lord, there's been tragedy in our country, and I pray that to the folks who lost family members, that they will feel your comfort and your presence. And I pray that somehow, some way, that your kingdom will be glorified through this tragedy. Thank you for giving us all the opportunity to be a part of this city. Go with us tonight as we conduct the business of the city. In your holy name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mr. Norton. We appreciate you helping us get our meeting off to a start this evening. Ms. Duncan, anyone to appear in public forum this evening?
No, sir.
With that, then, we'll move to the minutes of the council meeting from May 24th. Do I hear a motion to receive, council?
So moved. Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any items of note for the clerk? Hearing none. Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Arrowwood?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Ms. Booker?
Yes.
Mr. Dumas?
Yes.
Mr. Bettis?
Yes.
Ms. Albert? Yes. Mayor Danner?
Yes. We have a special recognition this evening, I'm going to ask the city administrator and Mr. Barry Davis to join me at the front, please. Barry, tonight we have a certificate of appreciation. It reads as thus: congratulations upon your retirement from the city of Greer, presented in appreciation of 27 years of dedicated service to the city of Greer, June 23rd, 1989 to June 23rd, 2016, given this day in Greer, South Carolina, the 14th day of June 2016, to Mr. Barry Davis. And we want to present you with this certificate of appreciation. The administrator has got a small gift for you. It is keeping time may not be quite as important to you as it's been in the past, but we're going to give you an opportunity to keep some time. And if you'd like to say something, we can give you an opportunity.
I might cry. It's been a ride. It's been a good ride. I appreciate everything the city has done for me and my family, and just thanks.
Thank you. We appreciate it. Give him a round of applause. This evening, we have a petitioner that would like to come before us this evening. The opportunity to be a petitioner is offered to those folks that contact the clerk and ask to be put on our agenda with an item that is germane, maybe not necessarily to the business we'll be conducting that night, but certainly to city business. And this evening, we have Mr. Mac Holliday. Mr. Holliday is with us this evening to give us information in regards to a traffic situation in and around his house, and has presented council members with a petition from the folks in that area as well. And so this evening, council will hear the information that is going to be presented. Typically don't take action on the same evening, but certainly are willing to hear the information and your requests. And so at this time, I would ask Mr. Mac Holliday if he will come to the podium. Mr. Holliday, is a matter of record. If you will give us your name and address, the floor is yours, sir.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Mac Holliday. I reside at 101 Hillside Drive, and that's in Burgess Hills. Native of Greer and longtime resident of Greer, and love our town, and privileged to be here to be able to present this. And everyone that I've spoken with has been very, very cordial, and kind of a first-time thing for us. But we've lived in Burgess Hills for 17 years, and it's always been kind of a cut-through at Hillside Drive and O'Neill Road. And but we've really seen that escalate in recent years, and I'd say within the last 3 to 4 years especially, and now with the Aldi store and the restaurant, now we're starting to see even more fast-paced traffic come through there. They're running through the stop sign at Hillside and Chestnut, and for our road, it's coming from it's coming from 3 different directions, people that are coming through and cutting through. And most of the traffic, I'm just observing, most of the traffic is cut-through traffic. I mean, that's exactly what it is. And, it's even convenient for us to use that sometimes. But it's gotten to the point where the security of our neighborhood is starting to be threatened. And we've had a few break-ins. We've had cars coming through at pretty good rates. I know there's a traffic study. Mr. Driggers was kind enough to send that to me, and I know some study was put forth toward that, and I appreciate that. And don't really know how all that information's collected, but I think the study was taking more down where Chestnut meets Mount Vernon, but I feel like the real problem area is where Hillside meets O'Neill, and O'Neill it's the county road. We've called Greer Police several times about it, and it's an Audubon. I mean, those cars are just wide open through there, and it's not patrolled. We talked to the county, and they put some low speed signs in there, and it's to no avail. And so we got fast-paced traffic there, and then people were just whipping in Hillside to cut around. And I've noticed especially here recently with I think I've noticed it more with the Aldi store. We've got a lot of cars, they're cutting through, but they're not going north. They're just taking a quick left to go back to Wade Hampton. So they're really just trying to beat the red light. And whenever you're trying to make time in traffic, you're driving a little bit too fast. And we've got a lot of young families that are starting to move into the neighborhood. We've got children. I've got a small girl that, frankly, I can't let her near the road, much less get out and walk and ride. So the security is a big issue. To take it a step further, we've actually witnessed drug trafficking transactions at our corner. We witnessed that more than one time over the years. And we just feel like, as residents, when I went around to Hillside and around to Chestnut, where most of the cut-through traffic's coming through, people were real eager to sign. They want to see something been done about it, because they're having trouble just backing out of their driveway, without somebody clipping them. So very, very eager to sign. Many of them said they would be more than happy to be involved or, come down to the city. And I don't have a real nice slideshow or anything for you, but I might could get some video to show you how crazy it is through there. And but what I had given you for a handout that was emailed to you, but we've got a color map on there that kind of indicates the path of traffic from Chestnut through to Hillside there. But what we're proposing with the petition is just to block off Hillside. I mean, I know it's one less alternative route, but the way I see it, anybody coming to Chestnut and Hillside can take a left and go in and out the main entrance of the neighborhood just as easy as they can go straight across. And to me, it would alleviate a lot of this cutting through. And, Blue Ridge Drive was just dead-ended. And, so I guess really it would make sense, to me, it would make sense to do the same thing with Hillside Drive. That way, whoever's coming in to our neighborhood would pretty much be people that live in our neighborhood. They'd be coming in and going out. And, the Mount Vernon, people that's on down Mount Vernon, they have other routes to take. They can go out Memorial Drive. They can come out the main entrance. So they have choices. So, that's it, pretty much. So now there is a new homeowner. The one signature I didn't get on the corner of Hillside. Someone just moved into that house, and I feel confident that they would be on board with this as well. And I'd be happy to get their signature and get any other information I can get to support it. So, but it's really, we just want our neighborhood. We just want to be able to get out and enjoy our neighborhood and not, feel secure in our neighborhood. Really, is the bottom line. So I appreciate you allowing me to present this. So.
Mac, if I could ask you.
Yeah, sure.
I think I noticed you said you didn't really get any pushback from anybody about not having that access?
No. Now, even going straight across Hillside, to the other side of Hillside, a couple of houses down, I'll tell you this story. There's a preacher lives there. He's a preacher at Double Springs. And he told me, he said, well, I go to work that way. And so I thought, well, he's not going to sign, So a little bit later in the conversation, he's reaching for my pen, So he said, well, you said that about you had a young daughter. And he said, if it would be more secure for your daughter, I'll be willing to take a little extra. I'll be willing to go around that corner and come in the other way. And, I thought that was really neat. And I think that's the heart of what we're really talking about here is security versus another traffic option. And, it's the traffic's just increasing. I would like to think the new construction part up there might alleviate some, but from what I'm seeing out my window, because see, we're right in the middle of it. What I'm seeing out my window is it's kind of a new pattern now. Now it's people cutting through and just taking a quick left. So, but no, I didn't go. I try to keep it to the area that's affected. But I did talk to a few people that were on back in the neighborhood, and they like to get out and walk in our neighborhood, and they were even in favor of it too.
Well, I remember I spent a lot of time in Burgess Hill. They had about a dozen really good friends growing up there, and yeah, it was. There was no traffic back in those days, and it's really a good place for families.
Yeah.
And that would return it to that probably.
And the neighborhood's turning over. You had a lot of widows, and now you're starting to get some young families, and there's a couple infants, babies, right near us, and then we have a 9-year-old, and there's some children right around that area where this traffic's coming through pretty quick.
Yeah. So. I get great pleasure if I'm on Wade Hampton and somebody peels off on O'Neill. I'll go a little faster to get that red light and turn right up that way. And if he's hung up at the stop sign, I just wave at him.
I wish they'd catch on to that. So. I've been thinking, do people think they'll make better time if they don't have to stop at a red light? And maybe that's true. I don't
Really?
know.
Yeah. Rarely do you have to stop there.
But if you do go north to get out up on Buncombe, that takes some time too. So.
Yeah.
Mr. Holliday, we appreciate
Yeah.
you bringing those concerns before us. We obviously are aware of the situation and want you to convey to your neighbors that it is of concern to us. You really don't have to bring a slideshow. I came up one day about 2 weeks ago just to see what was happening up there and turned on to Hillside and then eventually made that right onto Chestnut and was actually passed in that section of Chestnut between Hillside and Mount Vernon by a car that was trying to get down to the stoplight and go straight across onto Poinsett. So, witnessed firsthand somebody passing me in the distance of about 6 houses right there just to get in front of me to get to the stoplight quicker. So, we understand that there's some issues here. Please understand as well, too, that city roads, state roads, county roads are all involved in this. While we've certainly got a great engineering staff, Blue Ridge has already been closed, and we need to take a much broader approach to whatever we do up there, and we may actually need to invite some more expertise to help us look at this a little bit. But I am sure that your representative, Mr. Demas, and myself will keep this in front of our staff, and we'll let you know as soon as it comes back on our agenda for more discussion and or to pursue maybe some help in how we might address this situation.
Great, excellent.
All righty. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Matt.
With that, then, we'll move to the administrator's report. Mr. Driggers.
Thank you, sir. Members of council, a couple of calendar items. One is to make sure that we're all aware that Freedom Blast is just around the corner. Our community will be celebrating on Saturday, June 25th here at City Park for Freedom Blast, and we look forward to seeing you here in town for that event. Of course, Monday, July 4th is a holiday, so city offices will be closed. All emergency operations obviously will continue to operate. We'll have a holiday schedule. Things like garbage pickup will be one day delayed that week. And so when it falls on a Monday like that, most of the community certainly recognizes everything's on a one-day delay. We'll get caught back up by the end of that week. A couple of things I want to make you aware of. One is really a celebration for us to recognize one of our employees who happens to be here with us this evening and did not know that I was going to be sharing this with you. But we've received a communication from our partners over at the Appalachian Council of Governments. One of our department heads recently finished one of their management training programs and shared some information with us, and I wanted to share that with you. It says, it's with great pleasure that I inform you of the completion of Steve Grant of the Introduction to Management and Supervision course. He has completed 21 hours of in-class instruction as well as a thorough written examination. The course required cooperation and interaction in a diverse range of activities while in the class, as well as direct application of concepts learned into his individual workplace. Experiential learning provided further topics for class discussion, allowing the knowledge to be tailored to the individual manager. It was a great pleasure working with Steve. He has contributed greatly to the success of the overall class. Wanted to share that with you because I'm often asked what are the means and the measures that we take in providing training for our employees when they are promoted into supervisory or managerial positions, and one of those resources that we use is the Appalachian Council of Governments over in Greenville, and we're very proud of Steve for completing that program. Also want to make you aware that we have been notified by PEBA. You know, PEBA is the Public Employee Benefits Administration Board that handles all public employee insurance and benefit programs. One of the things that they are involved in is the retirement system for both our police officers and firefighters, as well as other employees that are involved in the South Carolina retirement system. They have notified us, and they are anticipating that effective July 1st that there will be an increase in the rates that will be paid by both employers and employees into the state retirement system. We have allocated for that in our budget. We were anticipating that was going to be happening, and so that has been provided for in our budget. But I do want to make you aware that the South Carolina retirement system, that the employer contributes 11.41% of the employee's salary into that retirement system. The employee will be contributing 8.66%. That is going up 0.5% July 1st. Those employees that are involved in the police officers' retirement system, we contribute 13.84%. The employer's responsibility is 13.84, and the employee is contributing 9.24% effective July 1st. Again, a 0.5% increase. So a 1% increase in overall collection, half by the employer and 1/2 by the employee. Again, we have allocated for that in our budget, and we will be making notification to all of our employees that is being passed along through to them from the state of South Carolina in the retirement system. You are also familiar that for the last several years that we do participate in a pool insurance program for both our workers' comp program and also for our liability insurance program. That pool program has operated very well over the last several years, and they have what they have a return of surplus. They have made a decision over the last several years to not necessarily affect the premiums, because that makes the premiums go up and down from year to year. But when the pooled program has been successful, they have returned funds. We will be receiving our portion of under the workers' compensation program. $2.5 million is being returned to those cities that participate in the pool, and also $1.5 million from the liability insurance program. So that 2.5 and that 1.5 for that $4 million that's being returned to the participating members. We have already been notified that for 2017 that the workers' compensation program will again have a return of surplus, and they are anticipating that will be again at about a $2.5 million rate. They will make that final decision after the financial statements are audited. But we've also been informed that because of claim history for all of the participating members in the program, that they are not anticipating a return of surplus on the liability insurance side for 2017. Of course, that's not good news anytime that we're notified that we would not be receiving funds back. But the good news is we never count on those dollars. And that's really the nice thing about the return of surplus concept of how they do that, is that we are billed and we pay our premiums as we would under any normal circumstance. If there is a return of surplus, those are mailed back to us, and we simply deposit those and we return those back into the general fund of the city. So it does not affect our budgeting in any regard, but we certainly wanted to make sure that you were aware that, that those programs are continuing to function well. While there is no anticipated premium increase on the liability insurance side, again, they are not anticipating a return of surplus. But the one for this year, we should be expecting, I'm looking for David, anytime now. It will be arriving here in the next week or so. Wanted to make sure that you were aware of that as well. That's the information that I needed to share with council. I will ask council's consideration. We have a couple of matters in executive session that I need to brief council on. One is an economic development matter concerning a piece of property and path forward on that property. And the other is a legal matter actually concerning our budget. And because it impacts our budget, I am asking council's consideration to hold over first reading of the budget until after executive session this evening. There's some information I need to share with you that I do not believe that it will impact. I anticipate that you will still have action on the budget, but I do believe it is information that you need to be advised of, informed of, concerning a legal issue. And full disclosure, we need to make sure you have that before we would be asking you to vote on the budget. So again, 2 items in executive session, and we'd be asking you to hold over first reading of the budget until after that executive session. That concludes my report. Certainly available to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir. As always, the administrator and department heads are available for additional information as required by council. We'll move to the appointments of boards and commissions. We've got a number of terms that will expire at the end of this month. Some of you may be prepared. Others of us are just now finding out, or at least being notified that those terms are going to be expiring, so we're going to need to be ready at the next session. As we go through these, simply as a reminder, unless you've already had an opportunity to speak to somebody that is your appointee, and if you would like to renominate them, or you're ready or prepared to nominate somebody else this evening, if you'll just indicate so as we move forward. We do have an appointment to the Greenville-Spartanburg International Airport Environs Planning Commission. It's currently being served on the Spartanburg County side right now by Mr. Miles Nason. His term will expire 6/30/2016. I'll be glad to contact Mr. Nason for his input in regards to his appointment in that regard. And so we'll take action on that at our next meeting. Board of Architectural Review, David Langley's term expires 6/30/2016. Board of Zoning Appeals, Mr. T.D. Campbell has resigned effective 6/6/2016. His term was set to expire 6/30/2018. I do not know how long T.D. Campbell has served on the Board of Zoning Appeals, but I do know that it is a long time. So
21 years.
21 years on the Board of Zoning Appeals. And I see that Mr. Grant has made his way to the podium. Do you have information in regards to one of the ones that I have mentioned, or one that's coming up here?
This one here.
Okay, good. Thank you, sir.
Zoning Appeals, even Mayor and Council, Mr. Pace would be here, but he had a phone call literally as we were walking up. He had to go home for an emergency at home, so I'm trying to fill in for him. As far as Mr. Campbell, Glenn has no recommendations at this time, and so council is free to make a recommendation, or if you like, Glenn can make a recommendation as well. So we just look for next time if that decision's made.
Okay, we appreciate it. That's District 5, Mr. Bettis's district, and so you haven't had to find somebody in 21 years for that position, Mr. Bettis. We're gonna turn that one over to you. Planning Commission, we have District 1, Mr. Foster's term expires 6/30, and an at-large appointment, Kevin Tumblin's term expires 6/30/2016.
Yes, sir. I've got an update on those. Mr. Pace has had no discussions with either commissioner, and I guess we would ask this council has a recommendation. We would certainly entertain that, or if you would like Mr. Pace to come up with a recommendation, we can do that as well.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Arrowood, that's Mr. Foster, and at-large would be mine. We'll seek Mr. Pace's advice and call our representatives and see where we want to go from there. Thank you, sir. With that, then, we'll move to items of new business. Mr. Grant, if you'll just stay right there where you are, we'll turn to you for information in regards to reading of ordinance number 16-2016. This is an ordinance to change the zoning classification of property owned by BCB and PRB2 LLC located at 321 Hammett Bridge Road from Planned Development Residential to DRD, which is a Design Review District. Mr. Grant, information that you can share with us in that regard?
Yes, sir. The applicant has requested it being tabled. They are looking at purchasing some adjacent property and most likely changing the scope and size of the project, so they are requesting this to be tabled at this time.
Council, you hear the request from staff. Does anyone propose that we hold this matter over?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Arrowood,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Ms. Bookert,
Yes.
Mr. Dumas,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Ms. Albert,
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
Yes. Second item we have before us is new business this evening is the first reading of ordinance 17-2016. This is an ordinance to change the zoning classification of property owned by Molar Properties located at 414 Jones Avenue from I-1, which is in industrial zoning, to RM2, residential multifamily. Mr. Grant?
Yes, sir. This was approved by the Planning Commission, and no one spoke in favor or in opposition to this proposal.
Entertain a motion to receive.
So moved.
Second.
Floor is open for discussion or questions. Hearing none, Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Arrowood,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Ms. Bookert,
Yes.
Mr. Dumas,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Miss Albert,
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
Yes. Grant, we appreciate you filling in for Mr. Pace this evening, and thank you for stepping in on short notice. Council, item C this evening is the first reading of ordinance number 18-2016. This is an ordinance to repeal the City of Greer Public Works fee and to establish a City of Greer sanitation fee. We spent some time in regards to this discussion at our workshop a couple of weeks ago. It now comes before us in ordinance form. For the purpose of discussion, I'm going to go ahead and ask for a motion.
A motion.
And a second.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Floor is open for discussion. I will ask the administrator if there is any additional information, new information, or updates in regards to our discussions previous to tonight.
No, sir, there's no new information.
Well, I would just like to say that I'm very happy to hear this new proposal.
I bet you are.
So I'm delighted with this change.
Is the fee the way it is? I believe you sent out a note last time that we still have a deficit at that rate, don't we?
Well, we would have a deficit if there were no change in the volume of service. So we're at 9,405 current accounts. We anticipate that once we are able to demonstrate that there are areas of the city that are being currently collected by private carriers, that our rate is about half of that rate. When we would anticipate those, and with the natural growth, when those are added, we anticipate that would be that it would negate any loss. That loss would only be if all things stayed exactly as they are today.
So if that happens, it's the same, maybe not by the same amount, but it's the same thing we've got now, right?
Well,
It'll have to be a funded deficit.
no, well, it would be if every dollar that is coming in out of the $115 was being then transferred directly to the contractor, but that is not the case. There are costs associated with running the program that are our costs, and so the only thing that goes up on a per customer basis would be that which we pay to the contractor for that collection. Their negotiated monthly rate that we have under contract for them for the collection of all 9,405 units.
So if it comes up at a deficit, where does that money come from?
Well, it would, as we have in the public service fund, we would allow the fund to operate. If it has a deficit in the first year, then the fund would have that deficit, and it would simply be recorded as a deficit to the enterprise fund. When we review that, we would advise you that that exists, and council at that point would have to make a decision whether or not we believe that that deficit would negate itself with what's occurring in the program, or we would recommend to council, and council would ultimately take action of whether or not there needed to be an adjustment to the fee. The intent is that we would operate that program at break-even basis, is that the fund doesn't lose money or make money. But we do know that there just isn't the ability to be absolute. So we're anticipating that in the first couple of years that there could be some loss. However, we believe with growth, building more residential units and adding residential units that are not currently being served, as well as the ability that we would recommend, while this ordinance is only dealing with the residential side because it's collected through the tax of that parcel of property, we extend this program also to our commercial business community. We then have another opportunity for revenue that we did not have before. And so we have not built that into the pro forma because we're not addressing commercial garbage collection at this point. But we do believe that opportunity exists. If I was overly concerned that 115 would not cover it for a while, obviously we would have recommended a higher number. But we do think that the 115 is cutting it really close. But in making that change from 75 to 115, we just didn't want to go to those 9,405 and do another $1, $2, $3, $4, $5. We tried to put it at what we believed would sustain itself long term. The biggest variable that we will have in our program are cost related to that curbside collection, the vendor. And we are under contract with our vendor at this point. There will be a point in time that contract has to be renegotiated, and we will rebid. And when we rebid that, council will ultimately make a decision of whether or not that service is going to be provided by a vendor or we provide that service internally, but there would be a cost to that. What this ordinance, and just not relative to any shortage, but what this ordinance is attempting for us to do is to operate it at a zero basis so that whatever it costs to provide that service, that it generates revenue to pay for the cost of that service. That it's not supplemented, nor does it make dollars. The intent of the enterprise fund is to break even.
And if it has a deficit, that comes out of the general fund.
No, sir.
Where does that come from?
Well, council would ultimately make that. The fund would be recorded as a negative number. You would have a negative.
I understand that, but you've got to pay the bill.
Well, but council ultimately would have to make this. You've carried deficits in funds before. Sure. You carry deficits in funds today.
I think the question is let me make sure I understand it, that if this time next year you have determined that the fund operated at a deficit, well, the question, I think what you're talking about goes to the next budget year. What Mr. Bettison, the question I have is, we've got to pay the current bill. Does those dollars come from the general fund? Because you got to pay the bill. Because you can't, we wouldn't, I understand that it's this council's prerogative to increase the fee, decrease, do away with it. But we're talking about going through a year, and then at the end of the year, we're deciding, or you've determined that it's at a deficit. Where does that deficit, where's that made up?
If there is a deficit, the deficit would be reported to council, and council would have the option to either choose to determine if you believe that deficit would work itself out over time. And typically, I would recommend to you that you would look at a 3-year window, operate the fund at a 3-year window. If you see that there's a trend that it's losing money, then there would be a recommendation that you would need to adjust the monthly fee. If it's making money, there would be a recommendation to reduce the fee. But if it's a deficit, the recommendation would be to raise the fee to cover the deficit in future years. The money to fund the program from this point forward would be like all tax revenue in that we receive the bulk of our taxes in November, December, January. And so the general fund, our resources float us through all of our funds until we receive tax revenue. And if that was too tight, we would issue a tax anticipation note, which is allowed for in our budget ordinance.
I think the distinction needs to be made as well too, that the tipping fees and the fee that we pay our collection company are only a part of the budget. So we can pay the bills with the budgeted number. If it comes up less, as the administrator mentioned, there's a piece of that budget that belongs to us as well too in there. So everybody that is invoicing us is going to get paid for what they're doing through the course of the year.
Without having to go into reserve funds.
See, that's my question is this is what we're doing now. It's just a different vehicle and we're calling it something different, right?
Is it a different? We are completely repealing what we do today, and we are considering enacting something completely different.
I understand all that.
Okay, I misunderstood the question.
All I'm saying is we're trading one horse for another because, in your opinion, what we're doing now is not kosher in some way. We're trading it for something that's kosher, but it's the same exact thing.
It's being funded differently. Yes. You had a program that charged $75 to every resident of the city, and we called that a public service fine. And what this program is doing away with that, and we're saying that if you don't receive residential garbage service, you don't pay that fee. Only those who are qualified to receive the fee pay it. But if you do, it's not 75 because 75 for the number of people who have garbage service wouldn't pay the bill. There would be a $300,000 deficit if you charge $75 for that service.
And where would that money come from?
That money would come out of your general taxes. It would be subsidized.
So you would basically do that if we come up with a deficit here. You got to, what Jay and I are saying.
Well, you would. I mean, I guess I'm not. We know that would be a $300,000 deficit. I mean, the math. It's a $300,000 deficit.
I understand that.
Today, the numbers, and I think I may know where the spreadsheet that Mr. Sell gave us at the last meeting showed that we anticipated that the numbers that we had today, that we would come up short in the first year of $4,138.
So we just tell Ace, we'll pay you when we get it.
No.
We'll
You got
pay
to pay
them.
that bill out of the general fund.
But the budget is a lot larger than what we're going to owe ACE at the end of the year.
I understand that.
Yes, sir. You're correct. Yes,
The
sir.
point I'm trying to make is,
Yes, sir.
we're doing the same exact thing. We're just raising the fee.
No, not
We
necessarily,
are, Rick.
because the fee that we had before was not an enterprise fund.
That's what I'm saying.
We
We've got a
adjusted
different
the budget to
vehicle.
whatever we collected. In this particular scenario, we'll have to adjust to the number that we spend, but that could be up or down. In the other case, it was never going to be down. We always operated it at a deficit.
Well,
We could have changed that fee.
We could have changed it.
While it did operate at a deficit, remember, the deficit became smaller and smaller each year, and it barely balanced out here in the end. The deficit became smaller, and so we didn't adjust the $75 fee because we saw that more and more properties were paying the $75 fee, more parcels of property. So the more that there were out there, the more of those that we collected. Those properties were increasing disproportionate to the number of properties that receive residential garbage service. I mean, there's just not an even number. More parcels of property than there were properties that receive garbage service.
Right.
But the only way not to have that
Because it wasn't called a
deficit,
garbage fee.
but the only way not to have that deficit was the fact that we were charging it to 10,000 parcels of property, or 13,000 parcels of property.
Who receive public service?
No.
Yes, they do.
Not all of them.
Now,
No, you had some that didn't.
I have an obligation to protect the confidentiality of executive session. So I will maintain that. My response is no, sir. No, that's not the case.
We'll just have to agree to disagree.
I do not believe that to be the case.
We'll just have to agree to disagree on that one.
Yeah,
Public service is not just garbage.
absolutely.
So they got public service.
You're talking about condominiums that have private streets?
That drive on our roads and have limbs that fall on our roads.
Half of our
We go back
employees
to that
or more
same.
drive on our roads and don't live in the city. What are they doing?
They pay it
The
somewhere
people
else.
from Blue Ridge, they come into our city and drive on our roads and go downtown.
They're paying
and
it
shop, which
somewhere
we
else,
wanna do.
Judy.
Yeah.
Nobody
Yeah.
escapes it.
Yeah.
Well,
I do not disagree, Mr. Bettis. I sincerely understand. From a staff perspective, I believe it is in the best interest of the city to have an enterprise fund for a designated utility than it is for a general operation for a portion of a department's budget.
I understand.
And that we can disagree on, but that is my recommendation to council.
Gotcha.
which we can easily correct if council so chooses by adding 40 cents to the $115.
Now, that's my question. He's saying, are we locking ourselves into each year? Say if it goes, like you said, you look at a three-year window, and then at the 3-year window, it's still running a deficit. Do we have an option?
Going up.
No, but do we have an option to take it out, to fund it out of the general fund, or you
Sure.
just?
You
Yeah.
certainly do. You can choose to subsidize that enterprise fund with a transfer from your general fund to that enterprise fund.
So
If
it's
you
not that we-
so choose to do that,
Yeah, we ain't
you
stuck
can
with
do
raising their
that.
fee every time it runs.
Now, you know that won't be my recommendation,
Oh, yeah.
but you do know that you can do that. Yes, sir. I will always recommend to you that an enterprise fund should operate self-supporting. That is the intent and the purpose of an enterprise fund. But your question is, can you subsidize an enterprise fund with a transfer from the general fund? Yes, sir, you can.
I've got one statement and then a question. This fee, I know that it's going up, but I hope that our citizens will look at it as that what they are paying for garbage service is half of what they could get it for anywhere else. And so I hope that point is made. My question is, in your calculations, to the best of your ability, this fee, this time next year, where do you think we will be? Do you think we'll be?
We are under contract. Our contract for the next 4 years remains at the same fee. So we are anticipating that we could lose about $4,000 a year each year for the next 4 years with what we know today. That's not picking up extra customers from neighborhoods that don't use us today, and that's not providing the service to our commercial businesses. If we are able to expand that program to do that, I believe that you then have the opportunity that you could actually have surplus dollars in that fund, and you could choose to hold those surplus funds because you know that you will have an adjustment to your contractor's fee in year 5. That's going to occur. We know that. You can hold those dollars to minimize any impact at that time, or you could choose to lower the fee if you were to have a surplus. We just, for
Now, those-
budgeting purposes, we're using the numbers that we know.
Okay, so the numbers that of the folks who are in neighborhoods who do not receive the service, but now they will. That's mandated, correct?
The ordinance says that if you are qualified to receive the service, then the fee is assessed to you, and obviously you would receive the service.
Okay.
Yes.
So we have residents now who aren't receiving the service, but because of the ordinance, they will. Now,
What will happen, this ordinance doesn't change that. We are aware that there are neighborhoods that are receiving curbside residential service with rollout containers from vendors other than us.
correct.
Our ordinance says that we would not, and the reason that that's occurring is because our ordinance says that they are not qualified for service because they have internal parking lots and not curbs and streets. For us to be able to collect those folks that are being served by a private vendor with a rollout container, we would have to amend our public services ordinance for garbage collection. And that's a separate ordinance that says here is who receives the service. We did not want to try to mix a financial ordinance with a service delivery ordinance. But that neighborhood, but the one I'm thinking of particularly off of Suba Road, probably has 300 residential units, maybe 250 residential units. We do not provide service to them. In this ordinance, they will not be charged for it because they're not qualified for it under our ordinance. So they will not be charged for it. If they desire for us to provide that service for them, which we know that we can do it at half the cost that they're paying a private vendor. If they request that of us, we would bring to you an amendment to that ordinance that describes what qualifies for service.
Okay, so our calculations now do not include those.
They do not.
Right, I got
And
you.
we believe that there's opportunity that those could be included going forward.
Right, okay. Thank you.
Others?
There is no opt-out on this, right? I mean, if you're...
If you are qualified, yeah, a house in the middle of a street that we pick up can't say, I choose not to provide this service. The ordinance says that it applies to all qualified residential units. And I think that's actually a good segue for a question. One of the things that we discovered in looking at our properties, today, in another environment, we assess a $75 public service fee to each parcel of property. Well, we know that there are parcels of property, that's a single parcel of property, that has more than one residential unit on it. So today, that property pays $75 for a public service fee. If you repeal that ordinance and enact the new ordinance, if it is a duplex with 2 residential units on that single lot, that property will be assessed for the 2 residential units. They will pay $115 times 2 because there are 2 residential units on that piece of property. If it's a tri or a quad, one piece of property, they're going to get it for 3 times or 4 times. If it is a mobile home park that is a single parcel of property, and in the old ordinance they were paying $75, and 72 mobile homes in that park were receiving residential garbage service, moving forward, that piece of property will be assessed 72 times 115. Each residential unit is assessed the cost because we provide the service on a residential unit by residential unit basis.
And they can't opt out even if they go to some kind of a roll-off service?
If they were to recommend that to us, we would come to you and we would recommend an amendment to your service ordinance that would allow them to opt out. Yes, sir, we would. But in today's world, in where they are today, they receive that service from us and from our vendor. We would notify, in particularly that case, we would notify that property owner of the change. If they said we would rather go to bulk container service and not have rollout containers in our neighborhood, it's better for us to do that, then we would make a recommendation to you to allow that. Because what we have found is that we have some places that have multifamily units. Some use bulk containers, some use rollout containers. Some use ours, some use a private vendor's. And that needs to get cleaned up. But specific to your original question, the ordinance does not allow a resident to call and say, I choose not to receive this service. If the service is provided to a resident, then they are charged for it. Now, if they don't use it, we can't control that. But if it's available to them, we will provide it to them, and they would be charged for it. As the ordinance is written.
First reading of ordinance number 18-2016. Floor is open for discussion. Questions? Additional comments?
I will advise that at the beginning of your next meeting, there will be 2 public hearings on the 28th. One of those will be for the budget, which we have already published. The second public hearing will be for the purpose of this ordinance. It is because it is a revenue-based ordinance, and that fee is assessed to the property owners, the taxpayers of the city. We will do a public hearing for that ordinance as well prior to your next meeting.
Additional comments?
I just feel like the rate is set as such and the service is such that no one would be able, in my opinion, to go out and get private service that picks up just about anything you put out the road, your limbs, your leaves, your recycle, whatever, and your trash can. It's picked up in an orderly fashion. I just don't see where anyone in the city would want to opt out and pay somebody double that unless they plan to take it to the trash place themselves or something. I just feel like we'd get excellent service for that fee. And I feel like it is the fair thing to do on, if it is going to be the trash fee, is that the condominiums that do not receive and the homes that do not receive the service should not be penalized for that and have to pay a fee for services they do not receive. Thank you.
Others? Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Arrowood,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Booker,
Yes.
Mr. Dumas,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Ms. Albert,
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
Yes. Council, as requested by the administrator, next item on our agenda is the first reading of ordinance number 19-2016 for us to gather additional information pertinent to the budget. We do need to go into executive session. What I would like to do would be to hold ordinance number 19-2016 until we return to this room. So at this point, I would like to ask your consideration of executive session. We will anticipate that we will take action in regards to ordinance number 19-2016 up on our return. Do I hear a motion that we adjourn into executive session at this point in time?
No motion.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Arrowood,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Ms. Booker,
Yes.
Mr. Dumas,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis, Ms. Albert, Mayor Danner.
Yes. Thank you, folks, for allowing us to go into executive session for two matters, an economic development matter and a legal matter. Having considered both of those matters, I'll ask for a motion to come out of executive session.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second in that regard. Pertinent to our conversation, ordinance number 19-2016 was set aside for us to get additional information from the administrator. We will now consider ordinance number 19-2016, City of Greer Budget Ordinance for fiscal year 2016-2017. I'll entertain a motion to receive
So moved.
Second.
and a second. Floor is open for discussion.
The only real, well, there's two things. I think planner is an inadequate name for this person. After reading through this job description, I think he's going to have to be called something like the Wizard of Oz. I mean, that's a ton of stuff this person's going to be doing, and I wish him well. That's going to be a daunting thing. I understand the need for it. The only other thing, and that kind of leads into the only other thing, you know, I'm always kind of interested in the ratio of salary and benefits to the budget, and we blew that out of the water this time. Yeah.
62.9%.
That's right, and it hadn't been that much.
We're at 61 this year.
Well, I got it lower than that this year when I looked at the numbers.
I don't have the budget.
Anyway,
Okay.
it's going in the wrong direction.
I respect that opinion. We believe that it is very much in line, but we are extremely conscious that that is an important number to our council.
Well,
And what it will do, and we really did review this. We really did review this. Anytime that you take that bump, like what we would be doing here, this commitment that we would be staffing up. Because, for example, we will take all of the expense for 4 telecommunicators. And all the expense associated with those 4 telecommunicators and their benefits would apply toward that percentage. But we can't reflect in that we're getting 2/3 of that from our partners as revenue. All right, so there's going to be some account in that type of scenario. In the others, particularly when we would have the number that we are looking at in this budget, I can assure you that doesn't happen again next year. And I can assure you that doesn't happen again in a year. That doesn't mean there would not be requests for additional positions. But what we did is that we held on positions that have been requested in our budget for the past 3 years. We held those for the last 2 years as we were preparing for and implementing the class and comp study that we did fully last year. And so to do that in 1 year, we went back to our departments and said, if we can implement that in 1 year, can we hold the line another year? And everyone said, yes, if we can do that over 1 year versus 2 years, this is how we would do it. When you do that, as the normal growth revenue would occur in year 2, for us being next year, not having that same proportionate increase relative to personnel expenses, you will actually see that compress.
Well, that's what I would hope. I mean,
That- yeah,
we're looking at like a 5% increase in revenue, right?
It should go down.
Right.
As a percentage of the total. So it'll have a bump in 2016-17, but we should see that normalize or even reduce in 17-18.
So
That's what we would expect.
in my calculation, I count a part-time person as a half. We're hiring about 13 and a half people.
That's
total.
correct. I think that's exactly the number.
Right.
Yeah. The
So-
equivalent of 13 and a half.
So you don't plan to do that next year?
No, sir.
All right. That's really my only issue. There's not a lot of change from last year. You know my issue, and we've talked about that.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I'd like some information at a later date, but back when we added 2 mills to go to increase our reserve fund, I believe that it's in the ordinance that once we hit a certain percentage in the reserve fund of the total budget, that we would roll those 2 mills back.
It's not in the ordinance. There obviously has been discussion of when we would be able to do that. I believe what you may be thinking of is the discussion we had with our auditor and with our finance on what we thought that fund balance level should be.
Right.
And as a matter of policy, where that would be. In our financial policies, we've tried to address that, but one of the big factors in this year, and the reason that that's not recommended in this year, is that we are recommending the establishment of that contingency fund that our financial policies recommended that we have not been able to implement. To do that, that's $175,000 that is set aside from your fund balance to that contingency fund. It's cash, it's our cash, it just is designated solely for emergency purposes. And that's at 1%? 1% of our operational expenses.
Okay.
So I think that's the big reason, and we're glad to get more information, but that's one of the bigger factors, and the fact that we're doing some transfers for projects out of fund balance. But we certainly do believe, as we would move forward, that opportunity presents itself. It just did not present itself in this budget.
Okay. And I remember the policies that we've implemented and trying to go by, so that makes sense.
We do have some updates that we need to make sure that we're sharing with you. Mr. Seifert has that. The budget documents that were in the link that were attached to your agenda and all of the numbers reflected in the ordinance are all accurate, and those are the numbers that we're operating off of. But we did need to make a couple of adjustments to a couple of the funds from the workshop till tonight, and we wanted to make sure that we covered those line items with you so that you were fully aware of those.
Mr. Seifert?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. At your desk earlier this evening, we placed only copies of the budgets we amended for these adjustments, as Mr. Driggers just mentioned. So there are 5 budgets at your desk. Those were placed on the website last week when the agenda was released, so you may have had an opportunity to see them prior, but we want to go over them, each line item that we changed, so you were fully aware of the line items that changed from the workshop 3 weeks ago to today. So first we'll start with the general fund, and we'll just quickly cover these so you were aware of these. Beginning on page 1, it is listed page 1 of 7 in the general fund. The Spartanburg County tax line, account number 4002, and the Spartanburg County autos, account number 4003. We have a reduction of projected taxes in Spartanburg County for the real estate taxes from $2,650,000, an adjustment of $229,085 down to $2,420,915. And then on the Spartanburg County autos, a reduction of $42,400 from $245,000 down to $202,600. And that is amending our projections on the Spartanburg County revenue for taxes. Moving to page 6 of 7. This is amending, making adjustments in our fund balance appropriation. One of those items that Mr. Driggers just mentioned was the creation of the contingency fund. The original amount for the fund balance appropriation was $200,000. That's what you saw during the workshop. That was a fund balance transfer to fund the Greer Station planning project. We added to that the $175,415 for the contingency fund, and then accounted for the reduction in the Spartanburg County taxes in that line item also of $271,485.
What page are you?
Where's that at?
That's page 6 of 7 on the revenue of the general fund. About halfway down the page, line item 4172, fund balance appropriation. It says $646,900.
Gotcha.
It was reported as $200,000 during the workshop. Are we clear there? Okay. Then if we'll flip to page 10 of 40, moving into the expenditures. Again, page 10 of 40. About halfway down the page, line item 422, property insurance. What we discovered in this last year was the employee bonds we were carrying for handling cash were not necessary, so we removed those employee bond expenditures from various departments across the city and moved that difference to the property insurance line. So there's an adjustment from $235,000 to $240,450, just making adjustments for those employee bonds that are no longer needed. Clear there? Okay. Then turning to page 28 of 40. Again, 28 of 40. About 3/4 of the way down the page, account number 616. It is titled Beautification. We originally reported in the workshop $22,000 as the recommended amount. I've reduced that $10,000 down to $12,000. This is in the recreation department, and Ms. Cunningham had requested in the budget that $10,000 for a gateway be in this line item. As a matter of accounting record, I moved that down to general fund transfers that we'll see next on the last page. So again, that's from $22,000 down to $12,000. an adjustment of 10 in the beautification line. And then the last page, page 40 of 40, will be the remaining adjustments in the general fund. This is the transfers section from the general fund to the other operating funds of the city. The very first line, account number 60008, transfer to contingency fund. This is the amount we mentioned earlier, that is the creation of the new contingency fund of 1% to account for emergencies in the city. An amount that was originally at zero, we created the fund and now has $175,415 in it as a fund balance transfer. The second line is account number 60023, that is transfers to our real property fund. That one was adjusted by $10,000 to account for the gateways that was in Department 450 and that beautification line that we just mentioned. And just so you're aware, in that $335,000 are 3 projects that are transfers from the general fund to the real property fund. There's the Greer Station commitment of $125,000. We have a Greer Station planning project for $200,000, and then rounding out the $335,000 is the $10,000 for gateways. Those are all the line item amendments in the general fund. If you have any questions, we're happy to take those.
Council? All right, we'll move to the next one.
Okay. The next one is titled the Contingency Fund. It will be Fund 8. This one is totally new. As Mr. Jiggers has mentioned, we talked about, this is a brand new fund for the contingency fund to handle emergencies. You will see on page 1, $175,415 as the transfer from the general fund. And then page 2, the line item there is transfer to fund balance. This fund is intended to not be spent unless there's an emergency. So there are no expenditures related to this fund in the budget. It is strictly held in a fund balance unless there's an emergency.
Council? Mr. Cypher?
Okay. The next fund we'll go over is titled Hospitality Fund, or Hospitality Taxes Fund, excuse me. This one will be easier to understand if we start on the second page. It is labeled page 1 of 3. So again, Hospitality Taxes Fund, page 1 of 3 will be the second page in your packet. In the top section, the third line, account number 60023, transfers to the real property fund. The original amount from the workshop was $10,000. It has been adjusted $136,500 up to the amount that you see tonight at $146,500. That is accounting for and budgeting for the approved allocation that council has approved for the Century Park construction project. And then on the second page, page 2 of 3, or excuse me, the third page, page 2 of 3 of the Hospitality Taxes Fund, the second line, account number 00994, titled Contingency. This line item is typically held for any excess expenditures, a revenue over expenditure that we may have in the Hospitality Fund. Through allocating the amount for the Century Park project, that amount that was originally reported at $27,242 has been reduced to 0. So there are no extra funds in the Hospitality Taxes Fund this year. And then flipping back to the very front page, the balance of those 2 line items that we just discussed, because those dollars are already held in the Hospitality Taxes Fund, you'll see a fund balance transfer from the very first line, account number 4172 of $109,258. Again, that is the balance to account for the approved allocation to the Century Park construction project. There's currently a fund balance in the Hospitality Taxes Fund of approximately $700,000. We'll be using about $109,000 of that. Any questions there?
Apparently not.
None intelligent, all you.
Okay, next fund will be the Stormwater Fund, Fund 19. If you'll turn to the second page, it is labeled page 1 of 2 of the Stormwater Fund dash expenditure. The second line item down, account number 60023, titled Transfer to the Real Property Fund. It was originally produced for you at $90,000. That has been reduced to $43,500 to reflect, again, the approved allocation of council to the Century Park project. And then if you turn to the next page, page 2 of 2, that reduction has been accounted for in line item, in the second line item down, account number 00563, Stormwater Projects. That line item has increased from $147,481 to $191,501. So we reduced the expenditures in one line item and balanced it by increasing the expenditures in the Stormwater Projects line item. That fund remained the same on the bottom line. Any questions on Stormwater Fund? Okay. The last one will be the Real Property Fund. It is Fund number 23. Again, the Real Property Fund on the first page, labeled page 1 of 2. The second line item down, account number 04157, is the Historic Preservation Grant. If you recall, this is a grant that we received in the current year we are in, but the project in that grant has not taken effect, and we have not received those dollars. So I'm carrying those allocations in the current year budget forward. So you'll see the revenue coming in from the Historic Preservation Grant of $25,000 in that second line item. And then if you move halfway down the page, the fund balance appropriation, account 04172, that is the city's match of $25,000 to that. That is an amount that is, again, approved in the current year that we're moving and carrying forward to next year's budget because it has not taken place. And then in the balance, the $50,000, the 225s added together. If you'll turn to the last page, this will be page 2 of 2 on the expenditure section for the Real Property Fund. The very first line item, account number 04157, Historic Preservation Expenditures. You'll see $50,000. Again, that is carrying forward the amount from that grant and that project. Those are the entire amendments that we've made from the workshop to today. Happy to take any questions you may have on those.
Council, having heard those changes, questions of Mr. Sackett? Thank you, sir, for the information. The floor is open for discussion. Questions? Or comments? Hearing none. Ms. Duncan?
Before we vote on this ordinance, we need to vote to come out of executive session. We didn't actually vote.
Excuse me. Having considered two matters in executive session, one economic development matter and one legal matter, we will now take action in regards to a legal matter after having come out of executive session. Do I hear a motion to adjourn from executive session?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Arrowood?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Ms. Bookert?
Yes.
Mr. Dumas?
Yes.
Mr. Bettis?
Yes.
Ms. Albert?
Yes.
Mayor Danner?
Yes. Now, in regards to the legal matter, we will take action in regards to the first reading of ordinance number 19-2016, the City of Greer Budget Ordinance, fiscal year 2016-2017. Prior, we have had a motion and a second in regards to ordinance number 19-2016. Any further discussion in that regard? Hearing none. Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Arrowood?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Ms. Bookert?
Yes.
Mr. Dumas?
Yes.
Mr. Bettis?
Yes.
Miss Albert?
Yes.
Mayor Danner?
Yes. Council, we stand adjourned.